Welcome to Mr. Sleepless Horror. Let's listen to horror stories to fall asleep with gentle rain sounds. I remember the day clearly, though I wish I could forget it. It was early September, the air crisp but not cold, the kind of day that smells like damp earth and distant pine. I had driven nearly 2 hours from my apartment in northern Vermont to a state park I had never visited. The plan was simple: set up a small tent near the edge of a secluded trail, read, maybe hike a bit, and leave before nightfall. I had been craving solitude, a break from the constant noise of the city and the monotony of work. Parking the car, I grabbed my backpack, loaded with the essentials: a sleeping bag, flashlight, granola bars, a thermos of coffee, and headed toward a clearing I had spotted on the park map. The sun was starting its slow descent when I found it, a small patch of flat ground surrounded by dense trees, the kind of place that felt like it existed apart from the rest of the world. Setting up the tent was easy, the fabric snapping in place with a hollow, satisfying tension, but as I hammered the last stake into the ground, something about the spot made the hair on the back of my neck prick. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, the way the shadows in the trees seemed to shift when I moved, as if they were aware of me, tracking me. I shrugged it off. I always overthink when I'm alone in the woods. The first hour was peaceful. Birds scattered through the branches, and the occasional rustle in the undergrowth sounded distant, harmless. I settled on a fallen log with my coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands, and tried to focus on the small journal I had brought to write. Then I noticed the sound. At first, it was faint, almost rhythmic, like tapping, like someone pacing slowly between trees. I froze listening, but the sound stopped. I thought it might be the wind, brushing against broken branches, or an animal scavenging for food. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was nothing, but the uneasy feeling settled in my chest, like the world had shifted slightly, and I was intruding somewhere I shouldn't be. I made myself pack the journal away, and step inside the tent to prepare for nightfall. Night in the forest is different from city darkness. There's no light pollution, no hum of distant traffic, only an enveloping blackness and the occasional call of an owl. I zipped up the tent and turned on my flashlight to organize my things. That's when I noticed it. The tent flap had been slightly moved, the fabric no longer lying flat against the zipper. My heart thudded in my chest, and for a moment I froze, trying to rationalize what I saw. I had pegged the tent stakes deep, I had checked the zippers. There was no reason for it to move on its own. And yet, there it was, a faint ridge in the fabric, as if something had brushed against it. I dismissed it as my imagination. Maybe the wind had shifted, maybe a branch had hit the canvas, but the unease lingered. I tried to sleep, cocooned in my sleeping bag, but every sound seemed amplified. Twigs snapping outside, the distant gurgle of a stream, a rustle that didn't belong to any animal I knew. At some point, I dozed, only to wake to the sensation of being watched. I couldn't see anything, but I knew instinctively I was not alone. The tent was tight, the air thick, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I heard it, a soft scrape, like a foot dragging against leaves, circling the tent. My stomach twisted. I grabbed the flashlight, forcing myself to peer outside, but the beam cut through nothing but darkness. No movement, no sign of life, yet the sound persisted, slow, deliberate. I realized the pacing wasn't random. It was circling the tent, stopping whenever I moved, resuming when I froze. I wanted to run, but the tent was my only barrier, flimsy and insubstantial against whatever was out there. My phone was in my backpack, on silent, and the thought of calling for help seemed distant, foolish. I told myself to breathe, to make sense of what was happening. Maybe it was a hiker, maybe someone messing with me, but no human would be patient enough to walk in circles for hours. And yet, the sound continued, almost teasing, dragging around the perimeter of the clearing. Sleep became impossible. Every creak, every rustle was amplified into a threat. I stayed awake until the sky lightened, watching shadows twist and contort in ways the mind shouldn't see. Morning brought no relief. The sun carved lines through the trees, illuminating the dew on the grass, the droplets shimmering on the canvas of the tent. I wanted to leave immediately, but I hesitated, wary of what I might see outside. Slowly, carefully, I unzipped the flap and stepped out. The clearing was empty. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest someone had been near, except for one thing. The sleeping bag was no longer inside the tent. It was gone. I hadn't moved it, hadn't taken it outside, yet it lay there in the middle of the clearing, zipped tightly with a faint imprint on the top, as if someone, or something, had used it recently. I never found the owner, never saw a person in the park that day. I packed up in silence, driving home with a stomach that refused to settle, my mind racing with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. I stopped going to that park after that, and I still can't drive past that road without gripping the steering wheel tight, remembering the way I felt, watched and helpless in the dark, while the thing outside waited patiently. To this day, I wonder if it had been watching me the entire time, maybe even before I set foot in the clearing. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear that slow, methodical scraping in my mind, circling endlessly around a tent I once thought was safe. It started on a late summer afternoon in northern Michigan. The sun was low, golden, slanting through the pines in sharp streaks, and the air had that dry, dusty smell that signals the end of the season. I had driven out to a small, unofficial camping spot I'd found on a map. No marked trails, no crowds, just a clearing near the edge of the forest where I could set up my tent and be completely alone. The drive had been long, the road a mix of gravel and potholes, winding past abandoned cabins and shuttered homes. I arrived with a sense of relief, my chest light with anticipation, the car rumbling to a stop on the uneven dirt. I grabbed my gear, a small dome tent, sleeping bag, flashlight, water, and a bag of trail mix. As I approached the clearing, I noticed it immediately. The smell of damp earth, faintly acrid, almost like old smoke. I dismissed it, thinking it might be from a distant campfire, and set about pitching the tent. The sun was dipping lower when I finished. The tent's fabric felt thin and fragile under my fingers, but it held, taut and secure. I knelt on the grass, arranging my sleeping bag inside, humming quietly to calm the growing unease in my chest. The forest around me was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. But then I heard it, a soft, deliberate crunch, as if someone were walking slowly just beyond the edge of the clearing. My head snapped toward the trees. Nothing moved. Just shadows. The sound stopped. I told myself I was imagining it, that it must be a deer or a small animal, but my gut said otherwise. By dusk, the forest had shifted. Shadows lengthened, merging into one deep, black wall. I zipped the tent closed, switching on my flashlight to organize my things. That's when I noticed the faint impression in the dirt outside, the shape of footprints, not animal prints, human. They led in circles around the tent, stopping and starting in a pattern that made no sense. My heart began to pound. Whoever, or whatever, was here had been watching me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a hiker, maybe someone else camping nearby, but there were no other vehicles, no trails, no sound of movement beyond those first brief steps. Nightfall made the fear worse. Inside the tent, shadows danced across the walls as the trees swayed in the wind. Every small sound was magnified, the faint rustle of leaves, a branch snapping, the scrape of dirt against tent fabric. I lay in my sleeping bag, paralyzed by the sense of being observed, unable to tell if I was imagining it or if someone was out there. Hours passed, though it felt like days, and the sounds continued, circling, stopping when I tensed, resuming when I tried to breathe calmly. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it again, slow, deliberate pacing outside the tent. My flashlight lay at my side, just out of reach. I wanted to grab it, wanted to peer into the darkness, but my body refused to move. Then came a sound that froze me entirely, the faintest scrape, like nails dragged across fabric, right on the side of the tent. I could feel the movement above my head, as if someone, or something, had climbed onto the tent itself. The thought of what could be doing that made my stomach knot, my mind flaring with panic. When dawn finally broke, I mustered the courage to unzip the flap. The clearing appeared empty at first, bathed in soft morning light, peaceful and calm. I exhaled shakily, relief and fear tangled in my chest. Then I noticed it. My small backpack, the one I had placed neatly inside the tent the night before, was outside, at the edge of the clearing. The zipper was half open, contents scattered, water bottle overturned, papers soaked and muddy. And the footprints, they didn't just circle the tent anymore. They led straight from the tree line, past my tent, and vanished into the forest, abruptly ending at the edge of a small creek, as if whoever made them had disappeared into thin air. I packed up quickly, every sound in the forest making me flinch. On the drive back, I replayed the night over and over in my mind, trying to find any logical explanation, but there was none. No one in the park, no one on the road, just me, my tent, and the knowledge that something had been patient enough to watch me for hours, circling, waiting, studying. Even now, I cannot drive past that stretch of forest without a chill crawling over my skin, a lingering dread that I might see someone standing at the edge of the trees, silent, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up convinced I hear the slow scrape of footsteps outside my bedroom window, circling, watching, never leaving. It was late October in upstate New York, the kind of day where the sun feels weak and the wind carries a sharp bite that seeps into your bones. I had decided to take a weekend camping trip alone, thinking it would help me clear my head after a grueling month at work. I found a small state park tucked along a winding river, the kind of place most people pass by without noticing. Parking my car on a gravel pull-off, I grabbed my gear, a small dome tent, sleeping bag, water, snacks, and a flashlight. The clearing I picked was near the riverbank, surrounded by tall maples whose leaves rustled like whispered warnings. Setting up the tent was straightforward, but something about the air felt off. The woods were unusually quiet, only the faint gurgle of the river breaking the silence. I shrugged it off, telling myself I was overthinking, and focused on getting settled. The sun dipped lower, turning the trees into long, black silhouettes. I sat on a log with my coffee, letting the river's murmur soothe me, when I noticed a faint sound, a dragging noise, subtle at first, like something heavy being pulled across the ground. My pulse quickened. I scanned the clearing, but there was nothing, only shadows that shifted unnaturally as the wind stirred them. I told myself it was a branch caught on another, or maybe an animal, and tried to relax. As darkness fell, the forest changed. The wind picked up, rattling the tent fabric, and the dragging sound returned, closer this time, circling my clearing in slow, deliberate sweeps. I could hear the crunch of leaves, soft but distinct, as if someone were pacing just out of sight. I stayed still, straining to hear, the flashlight useless in the darkness. Minutes passed like hours. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't force my body to move. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening, waiting, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Around midnight, the sound stopped abruptly. Silence filled the forest, heavy and suffocating. I dared not breathe loudly. Then came a low scrape, metallic and deliberate, along the side of the tent. My stomach lurched. I didn't want to look, yet I had to. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it at the tent walls. Nothing visible, but the shadow of the scrape lingered, a faint line across the fabric. My hands shook as I realized it wasn't random. The movement traced the shape of my tent, as if someone had walked all around it. My heart thudded so loudly I thought it might give me away. Morning brought no relief. Sunlight filtered weakly through the trees, and the clearing appeared peaceful, almost innocent, as though nothing had occurred. I stepped outside, shaking, and froze. The ground around my tent bore footprints, large, heavy, human, but they didn't stop at the edge of the clearing. They traced a slow circle around the tent, stopping abruptly at the riverbank. I followed them with my eyes, feeling a cold knot tighten in my chest. There was no one there. The prints were fresh, yet no sound or sight of a person disturbed the morning calm. I packed up quickly, my hands fumbling with nerves, and drove back down the winding roads, replaying the night in my mind. Every rational explanation collapsed under the weight of what I had felt, what I had heard. Someone had been there. Someone had circled my tent, watched me, lingered just beyond the shadows. I never reported it. Who would believe me? And the thought that chills me most now is that if someone had been so patient to stay silent, to watch me for hours, they could have been watching long before I even arrived. I haven't gone back to that park. The image of those prints circling the tent, the sound of dragging feet in the night, and the oppressive silence lingers in my memory. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right outside my apartment window, I swear I hear the same slow scrape, circling, waiting, and I wonder if that person, or something like them, ever really leaves. It was mid-July in northern Wisconsin, the kind of day where the heat clings to your skin, but the forest offers a deceptive coolness. I had driven out to a state-managed forest preserve, seeking a quiet weekend alone. The park was mostly empty, just a few hikers and campers scattered across the larger areas. I wanted seclusion, so I drove down a gravel road marked only on older maps, ending at a small clearing by a pond. The ground was uneven, littered with pine needles and small rocks, but it was flat enough for my tent. I carried my gear carefully, sleeping bag, small dome tent, flashlight, and a bag of supplies. The smell of damp earth mixed with pine was strong, almost overwhelming, as I began setting up. By late afternoon, the tent was secure, taut against the stakes. I sat on a fallen log nearby, sipping water, trying to calm the creeping tension I felt. Something about this spot was off, too quiet, too still. The birds had vanished, and even the wind felt hesitant, barely stirring the branches. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to paranoia, but the feeling of being watched clung to me. I took out a small notebook, doodled a few lines, and tried to focus on something mundane. Then I heard it, faint snapping, like a stick breaking under a slow, deliberate weight. I froze, straining to listen. The sound came again, moving around the perimeter of the clearing. My pulse quickened, but when I shone my flashlight toward the trees, nothing appeared. Nightfall brought no relief. Darkness swallowed the clearing quickly, the sky turning a deep, inky black. Inside the tent, shadows flickered as the wind brushed against the fabric, and every minor noise sounded amplified. Leaves crunching, small twigs snapping, water sloshing in the pond. Hours passed in silence and tension, punctuated by the occasional rustle just beyond the tent walls. I could feel the pattern of movement outside, deliberate, slow circling. Sleep was impossible. I stayed wrapped in my sleeping bag, listening, watching for the faintest clue of presence. Around 2 a.m, I heard it, a dragging sound, metallic and uneven, scraping along the side of the tent. My stomach tightened. I gripped my flashlight, preparing to confront whatever was outside, but I forced myself to stay still. The sound moved rhythmically, slowly, all around the tent. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs were frozen. The minutes dragged endlessly. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating, and I was left with the knowledge that whatever had been circling me had not revealed itself, yet had made its presence undeniable. By morning, the clearing appeared serene, bathed in golden light. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the ground. My backpack, which I had left inside the tent, was now outside, lying on its side. The contents were scattered, the water bottle toppled, the notebook soaked in dew. And the footprints, human, large, deliberate, encircled my tent fully, then abruptly vanished toward the pond. No other signs of a person were visible. I packed quickly, uneasy and shaken, retracing my steps back to the main road. Even weeks later, I still think about it. The dragging, circling, patient presence in the night, and the footprints that vanished without explanation. I don't tell people about it, because no one would believe it. But when I walk past similar woods now, I can't shake the feeling that someone could be waiting, silent, circling, and watching, the same way they did that night by the pond. It was a late spring weekend in western Pennsylvania, the kind of day where the air is fresh but carries a faint, lingering chill from the nights before. I had driven out to a small state forest I hadn't visited in years, hoping for a quiet retreat, a break from work and the city. The trailhead was narrow and gravelly, leading into dense woods with only occasional clearings. I parked my car, loaded my backpack with a small tent, sleeping bag, flashlight, water, and snacks, and headed toward a clearing I had scouted on the map. The forest floor was soft with fallen leaves and moss, the smell earthy and sweet, but under it, I felt a subtle unease, like the trees themselves were observing me. Setting up the tent took longer than I expected. The ground was uneven, and the tent stakes kept slipping into roots and rocks. By the time I was finished, the sun had begun to dip behind the trees, casting long, skeletal shadows across the clearing. I sat on a log, sipping water, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Then I heard it, a faint crunching, almost rhythmic, like someone pacing through dry leaves. My head snapped toward the trees. Nothing. The forest seemed still, except for the whisper of wind through the branches. I told myself it was a deer, an animal moving quietly in the underbrush, but the cadence was too deliberate, too calculated. Nightfall turned the forest into a wall of black. Inside the tent, shadows flickered across the fabric as the wind shifted. Every sound, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, water dripping, felt amplified. Then I noticed it, a soft scrape along the tent, moving slowly from one side to the other. My pulse jumped. I gripped the flashlight, shining it across the tent walls. Nothing appeared, yet the scrape continued, slow, deliberate, circling as if mapping the outline of the tent itself. I lay frozen, listening, my body rigid with fear. The minutes dragged endlessly. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I couldn't move, couldn't tear my eyes from the darkness. Hours passed like days. The forest remained oppressive, silent but alive with subtle noises just beyond the tent walls. At one point, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, pacing in a wide circle around the tent, stopping whenever I moved, resuming when I froze. Sleep was impossible. I tried to rationalize it, another camper, a hiker, but the thought made my stomach twist. No car, no trails, no other signs of life. Whoever it was, they had been patient, waiting silently, studying me. When dawn broke, I forced myself to unzip the tent. The clearing looked peaceful, almost innocent. Then I noticed my backpack, which I had placed neatly inside the tent, now lying outside. The contents were scattered, my water bottle tipped over, papers wet and smeared with dirt. And the footprints, they weren't just human, they were deliberate, circling the tent fully, then abruptly ending at the tree-line, as though whoever had made them had vanished without a trace. I drove back home in silence, my mind spinning. Weeks later, I still have nightmares of the slow, deliberate pacing outside my tent, circling, waiting, never revealing itself but always present. Sometimes I think about the footprints, the scattered backpack, and I can't shake the feeling that someone could be there again, patient, silent, and watching, waiting for the perfect moment. It was early August in the northern reaches of Pennsylvania, the air thick and humid, the kind that sticks to your skin even when you try to shake it off. I had been looking forward to this solo camping trip for weeks, needing to escape the constant pressure of work and the noise of the city. I parked at the edge of a state forest, a small gravel lot barely wide enough for my car, and loaded my backpack carefully. Dome tent, sleeping bag, water, granola, a small first aid kit, and a flashlight. The map showed a clearing not far from a narrow, twisting trail, the kind of spot that didn't attract other campers, and that's exactly what I wanted. As I walked, the scent of pine and damp soil grew stronger, rich and earthy, but beneath it was something subtle, almost sour, like decay. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining it. The clearing was small, encircled by dense trees that bent toward one another, branches interlocking overhead to form a natural canopy. The ground was soft but uneven, littered with pine needles and the occasional rock. I dropped my pack and began setting up the tent, the fabric snapping and stretching as I secured each stake. There was a strange stillness here, more pronounced than I expected. No birds sang, no squirrels scuttled, even the wind seemed muted. My heart beat a little faster as I zipped the tent and stepped back to take it all in. I tried to dismiss the unease as nerves, a simple overreaction to being alone in a forest. As the sun sank lower, turning the canopy into a lattice of shifting shadows, I settled onto a log with a bottle of water and tried to enjoy the silence. That's when I first heard it, a faint, irregular crunch from somewhere beyond the clearing, like someone stepping on dry leaves. My pulse jumped. I froze, straining to hear, but the sound stopped. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer moving carefully, but instinct told me it was different, deliberate, too controlled to be random. I returned to my tent, my mind restless, feeling eyes on me though I couldn't see anyone. Night arrived quickly. Darkness pressed in like a solid wall, and the forest transformed. Each small sound, the scraping of a branch, the faint drip of condensation, seemed magnified. Then it started, slow, methodical scrapes along the side of the tent, circling, stopping, resuming. My stomach turned. I gripped the flashlight and shone it across the fabric, seeing only shadows twisting with the wind. My mind raced. I thought about calling for help, but the dead zone on my phone made it useless. Whoever it was, they had been patient, careful, and utterly silent, circling me like a predator studying prey. Hours passed in endless tension. Every rustle, every faint snap of a twig made me jump. The footsteps outside the tent came and went, pacing in wide circles, halting when I moved, resuming when I froze. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My thoughts spiraled, imagining the possibilities, all of them terrifying. I pictured someone hiding in the trees, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Rational explanations, hiker, lost camper, fell apart under the sheer patience evident in the sounds. Whoever it was, they had intended to remain unseen, invisible but present. When dawn finally broke, I unzipped the tent, the morning sunlight spilling into the clearing. The forest looked peaceful, innocent almost, as if nothing had happened. But then I noticed my backpack, which I had left inside the tent, now outside. Zipper open, contents scattered, water bottle overturned, a thin layer of dew-soaking papers and trail mix. And the footprints, large, deliberate, encircling the tent fully before abruptly stopping at the edge of the clearing, vanishing into the forest. There were no other signs of life, no vehicle tracks, no distant voices. The thought that someone had been there, watching me all night, circling silently, patient, and unafraid, made my chest tighten. I packed quickly, nerves frayed, retracing my steps back to the main road. The memory followed me home, clinging like a shadow. Weeks later, I still feel the same pressure when walking near any dense forest, the sense of eyes on me, calculating, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustles against my apartment window, I swear I can hear the slow, methodical scrape, circling, tracing the shape of my room as it did the tent in the clearing, patient, unseen, and terrifyingly deliberate. It never truly leaves. It was early September in northern Maine, the air crisp but carrying the faint humidity of a recent rain. I had planned a solo camping trip, hoping to escape the noise of the city and the constant hum of work. The forest road was narrow, gravelly, and winding, flanked by tall pines and occasional scrub. I parked at the edge of a small clearing I had spotted on an older map, carrying my backpack with a small dome tent, sleeping bag, flashlight, water, and a few snacks. The clearing was quiet, almost unnaturally so, the usual hum of insects absent. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was overthinking, and began setting up the tent. The ground was uneven, littered with pine needles and small rocks. It took longer than expected to secure the stakes, but eventually the fabric was taut and the tent stood firm. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the clearing, and I felt a subtle unease in the back of my mind. It was the kind of quiet that presses in, that makes the hair on the back of your neck rise. I tried to ignore it, setting up my sleeping bag inside and arranging my small supplies. As night fell, the forest transformed. Darkness pressed against the tent walls like a living thing. Every small sound was amplified, leaves crunching, branches swaying, water dripping from the canopy above. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate scrape along the outside of the tent. My heart jumped, pulse quickening. I grabbed the flashlight, sweeping it across the fabric, but there was nothing. The scraping continued, slow and patient, moving in deliberate circles. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I couldn't move. I lay frozen, heart hammering, listening to footsteps pacing rhythmically around the tent, halting when I shifted, resuming when I froze. Hours passed, each moment stretching unbearably. Sleep was impossible. I tried to rationalize it, maybe another camper, a hiker, but the absence of trails, cars, or any other sounds made that impossible. Whoever it was had been meticulous, silent, and patient, waiting, watching. The fear became unbearable, pressing down on my chest like the weight of the forest itself. When dawn finally arrived, I cautiously unzipped the tent. The clearing appeared peaceful, bathed in golden light. But my backpack, which I had left inside, was now outside, contents scattered across the damp ground. Water bottles were overturned, papers soaked with dew, snacks crushed. And the footprints, they circled the tent entirely, then abruptly stopped at the edge of the clearing, vanishing into the dense forest. No signs of a person, no tracks leading further, nothing but the unsettling knowledge that someone had been there, observing, patient and deliberate. I packed quickly, driving home in silence. Weeks later, I still feel the same oppressive unease when passing similar forest roads. At night, when the wind shifts just right, I can swear I hear that same slow, methodical scrape, circling, watching, waiting for the right moment. And I realize some presences, some patterns of fear, never truly leave, following you long after the clearing has been left behind. It was mid-October in northern Vermont, the kind of day where the wind carries a chill, and the sky is a flat, pale gray. I had driven 2 hours from my apartment to a small, remote state park I had never visited. The goal was simple: set up a tent in a secluded clearing, enjoy a night alone in the forest, and leave early the next morning. The gravel road twisted between dense pine and maple, the occasional abandoned cabin peeking through the trees. I parked my car at the trailhead, grabbed my backpack with a small dome tent, sleeping bag, water, snacks, and a flashlight, and hiked toward the clearing I had marked on the map. The smell of damp leaves and pine was heavy, earthy, almost pungent, and it pressed into my senses as I walked. The clearing was smaller than expected, encircled by thick trees whose branches bent toward one another. I set up my tent carefully, securing each stake into the soft ground. Shadows deepened as the sun sank lower, stretching across the forest floor, merging into shapes that didn't belong. I tried to ignore the unease crawling up my spine, convincing myself that it was just nerves. I sat on a fallen log with a bottle of water, trying to relax, when I first heard it, a soft, irregular crunching, like footsteps on dry leaves. My heart jumped. I turned toward the tree line. Nothing moved. The sound stopped. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, a deer maybe, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too controlled. Night arrived, heavy and complete. Inside the tent, shadows flickered along the walls as the wind stirred the fabric. Every small noise outside, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, water dripping from branches, sounded magnified. Then I noticed it, a faint scrape along the side of the tent, slow and deliberate, moving in a wide circle. My pulse quickened. I grabbed the flashlight, sweeping it across the walls. Nothing appeared, yet the sound continued, tracing the perimeter like someone mapping the shape of the tent. My stomach knotted with fear. Hours passed, each second unbearable. The footsteps outside the tent came and went, halting whenever I moved, resuming when I froze. Sleep was impossible. I tried to rationalize it, maybe another camper, a hiker, but no car tracks, no trails, no other signs of human presence existed. Whoever had been there had been patient, silent, and deliberate, waiting, observing. When dawn finally broke, I unzipped the tent cautiously. The clearing appeared calm, bathed in soft morning light, deceptively peaceful. But my backpack, which I had left inside, now lay outside, zipper open, contents scattered. The water bottle had tipped over, papers damp with dew, snacks trampled. And the footprints, human, large, and deliberate, circled the tent completely before abruptly disappearing at the tree-line, vanishing into the forest. I packed quickly, shaken, and drove home in silence, the oppressive sense of being watched lingering with me. Even weeks later, I feel the same dread near similar forest roads. Sometimes at night, I hear it in my apartment, a faint, methodical scrape, circling, patient, waiting. And I remember that some presences, some people, and some fears never truly leave, following you long after the forest has been abandoned.